समारोहका सभापति महोदय र मञ्चमा आसीन विशिष्ट व्यक्तित्व र particularly our good friend from India, Mr. Khan, who has come all the way on a very special day to be with us. Being the first speaker, a senior citizen of the country, and a very senior doctor of the country, I think it's my duty to welcome you. And it's my privilege. Believe me, I feel extremely honored and a bit emotional also today, because I look at the young, enthusiastic audience who are mostly from my own fraternity of medicine. And it took me back to my childhood days or early days when I was a teenager aspiring to do medicine. What was it like in the country? Please be assured, we have lived through this history of the nation in the most formative years. We have lived through it, and in a way we have been catalyst to this change. So nothing gives you enormous satisfaction than to see how many people have come to medicine now. When I got a chance to study medicine, only 4 people will get a chance to go to India to study medicine. 4 people per year. And from there, within 50 years, we have brought about a change in the country which is unprecedented. Whatever the West achieved in 500 years, we did within 50 years. All of you deserve a very special thank and congratulations. And I am particularly proud of my predecessors and our generation. I'm very hopeful of the young generation who is there ready to take over from us. We now believe medicine in Nepal is very safe, in your hands. So that gives me enormous satisfaction. Now, saying that, you have entered such a profession which is medicine. I remember when I started medicine, my father was an Ayurvedic physician. And medicine in my family runs in the 3rd generation now. And it is something very special. Don't compare with anything else. I remember my father saying to me, I'll use some of the Sanskrit verse and I'll probably translate it. Kochit danam, kochit manam, kochit dharma, kochit dhanam, kochit moksha, kochit jnanam, chikitsa nasti nisphalam. This was what Dhanvantari said over 4,000 years ago, and which is still very true. When it comes to medical philosophy, or religious philosophy, or even science, as you know now, we don't have to look to the West. Our ancestors have enriched us with all this vast knowledge, and you just have to dig it out. And this treasure lies in Dhanvantari's writing. What it essentially means is, if you practice medicine with honesty and dignity and integrity, you can achieve all 6 things anybody aims for. Dan, man, dharma, gyan, moksha. Dan gives you dharma, dharma gives you moksha. Moksha is the eventual bliss and salvation. If you are a passionate practitioner of medicine, you don't have to go to the temple, you don't have to go to the church, you don't have to go to the mosque to pray. Your patient is your God, your hospital is your temple. And if you practice medicine with that, hospital means hospital with boundary, hospital without boundary. The art of healing. So essentially what we are trying is that inner eternal bliss, what we call moksha. If any professional can achieve that in his life, while still alive, it is people in the healing profession. Doctors, nurses, paramedics, anybody in healing profession. That is medicine. So having said that, what is moksha? I think that's essentially everything what all of us want. Happiness is very superfluous. And in Gita, Lord Krishna says many things. And why we often quote Gita is because the essence of all Sanatana philosophy is Gita. As the famous saying goes, Sarvo Upanishado Gavo Dugda Gopalanandana Partho Bhakta Sudhir Bhokta Dugda Gita Mitan Mahat. Gita is the essence of all Upanishads. And during the Mahabharata Yuddha, Lord Krishna was the milkman who milked the cow. Gita is the essence of that. That's Gita is the milk. And Arjun is the calf who started the process of letdown. So Arjun provoked Lord Krishna, he milked the cow, and the milk is Gita. He synthesized all Upanishads, and the milk that was delivered was Amrit, which all of you should consume and make yourself wiser. So what essentially Gita says is, to get moksha, you don't have to go to the temple. There are very many yogs of achieving this ultimate bliss. And one of them is Karma Yoga. So medical practitioners essentially are Karma Yogis. And believe me, it's not because I don't have faith. It's because I don't have disrespect. I have not entered the temple of Lord Pashupatinath with a view to pray. Because Gita says a karma yogi doesn't have to pray. So all of you are doing your karma with all good intention every day. And I don't think even wasting 5 minutes of your time to pray, you don't need to do that. That's what Gita gives you, the liberty. I thought I need to quote it because we are talking about many things now. People are getting a bit of touchy about religious philosophy and other things. At some point, everything is the same. These divisions are very superfluous. And Gita says, whatever duty you do your best intention, you get moksha. So, whatever you do the best. You be the best. In the beginning, I was hearing this famous song from Bhupi Sersan about Nepal. I'm talking about Sagarmatha. And every time we honor people who climb Sagarmatha, that's a physical mountain, Sagarmatha. All of us have got our own Mount Everest to climb. Remember that. All of us have to be our Appa Sherpa ourselves. That doesn't mean you bully the government, ask them to waive off the revenue and go and climb Mount Everest. Climb the Mount Everest of your profession. All of you have got that challenge in front of you. If you are a lab technician, be the best lab technician. If you are a radiographer, be the best radiographer to be able to challenge a radiologist. You don't have to be an MBBS doctor. If you are a cardiologist, be the best one. We have got an example here. A mediocre cardiologist is far worse than the best lab technician. Remember that. So each one of you have got a Mount Everest to climb. Each one of you are supposed to compete with yourselves, not with somebody else. That's what philosophy of life is all about. And that is what makes you what we call a big man. You don't have to be a famous man, so-called famous man appearing in national television every day and talking the garbage, nonsense. All of you have got the ability to be a great man. Thulo manche. What is a big man? You can define in many ways. But I remember a very touchy incidents I had with one of the scholars of this country. And he told a very nice story that when you are a small kid, everybody will say, be a big man, my son, be a big man. You must have read the poem from Rudyard Kipling. I think all of you should read. I can recite it here, time doesn't permit me. What makes you a big man? What makes you a successful man? Man means, I don't mean only the male gender, human being. And he cited a nice incident. He asked the then scholar Yadunnath Khanal, "Sir, what do you mean by a big man?" And Yadunnath Khanal answered very nicely, "Well, my boy, every year when you have got Vijaya Dasami and your parents give you tika, if they tell you, be like that fellow, that's a big man." कसैको बाबुआमाले फलानु जस्तो भएस् भनेर आशीर्वाद दियो भने त्यो फलानु ठुलो मान्छे हो। त्यसकारणले ठुलो मान्छे हुनको लागि 20,000 मान्छेको हत्या, 50,000 झुटो बोलेर, अरबौंको तस्करी गरेर, ठुला बिल्डिङ बनाएर, हेलिकप्टर र टेलिभिजनमा अपियर गरेर ठुलो मान्छे भइदैन। अब म प्रश्न गर्छु, विजयादशमीको दिनमा आयुर द्रोणोसिते श्रियो दशरथे शत्रुक्षयो राघवे भनेर तपाईहरुको मातापिताले आशीर्वाद दिइसकेपछि फलानु जस्तो भएस् भन्दा फेरि अहिलेको कुन नेता जस्तो भएस् भनेर आशीर्वाद दिनुहुन्छ। त्यसकारणले दे आर अटर फेलियर्स। कसैले हामीहरुको पालामा भन्थे आशीर्वाद दिँदा फेरि ठुलो भएस्, धेरै पढेस्, लक्ष्मीप्रसाद देवकोटा जस्तो विद्वान भएस्, विश्वेश्वर प्रसाद कोइराला र गणेशमान जस्तो नेता भएस् भन्थे। गए ती अब नेपालमा तिनीहरुको फोटो झुन्ड्याएर, तिनीहरुको फोटो मुनि लुकेर ठग्ने हो, झुटो बोल्ने हो। त्यसकारणले ठुलो मान्छेको खडेरी परेको बेलामा तपाईहरुबाट ठुलो मान्छेको खोजी गर्दैछौँ। And remember, if you fail to inspire your successive generation, you cannot be a big man. And remember the famous poem from Longfellow. I'll cite one stanza of that. That says the lives of great men always remind us. The lives of great men always remind us that we can make our lives sublime. And while departing, leave behind us footprints in the sand of time. Footprints that perhaps another, sailing over life's solemn main, a forlorn and shipwrecked brother, seeing shall take heart again. If you cannot give direction to our future generation, this is the way to come, I have left my footprint, you are an utter failure. Whoever leaves footprints in the sand of time is a big man. Very much like Yadunnath Khanal has said. And being of modest background should not limit you to have a big ambition. What I frequently say is that you close your eyes and imagine something, how your life is going to be. And then spend the rest of your life achieving that. Set your target, close your eyes, half a minute, this is what I'm going to do. And then spend the rest of your life to realize that goal. That's essentially life. Yet there are people who have spent good 6 years to give a constitution. They bloody don't know what they want. I'm sorry for the word. It takes 5 seconds to think what you want. And these people have wasted 6 years of the nation. They don't know what they want. They still don't know what they want. And then do you think the country will be safe in their hands? No. I want you to say no from the audience. No. So it's your future. It's your future. People in their 70s and 80s don't have any right to chart your future and make it so rigid that you will have great difficulty to change it. revolt. Change it to suit your future. That's my request. So, I would like to quote one very famous man I met. I was very fortunate to have dinner with him. And he happened to be a good friend of one of my seniors from India, the late Dr. Ramurthy, who was the founding figure of neurosurgery in South India, and the past President of India, APJ Abdul Kalam, happened to be a good friend of his. And then we had a nice conversation during dinner in Akanati many years ago. And what he told me was, Doctor, I believe, looking at your mountains in Nepal, they inspire me. These mountains inspire me to go to the top of the mountains. So each and every Nepali, every morning, should look at the north, look at the mountains, not as a source of sorrow, landslide, but source of inspiration. One day I did that. And he told me additionally that thinking low is a crime. Every human being should be allowed to think highest. Thinking low is a crime. Yet, what is our present leadership forcing us to do? Think low. Don't think beyond this. You should be allowed to think the highest. Why should we not have some of the future Nobel Prize winners in medicine from this audience? You have all the ingredients needed for that. But do you think your political establishment, the constitution they are going to make, the medical education they are going to hand over is going to breed the future Nobel laureate from this audience? No. So change it. Your future is in your hands. So again, to re-quote APJ Kalam, the famous past president of India, a scholar. I am very fortunate to have an hour with him during dinner. Very nice. And I thank late Ramurthy for putting us together. Professor Ramurthy had visited Nepal, and very nice man. Thinking low is a crime. You get out of this self today and start thinking high. Sky is the limit. There is nothing you cannot achieve. It's possible. Now, while trying to achieve the highest goal, you will not always succeed in the first goal. That's the reality of life. How do you handle these intermittent failures in life? It is bound to come with your life. You should be able to handle success with humility and failure with determination that you are going to do better next time. There is a very famous saying in Nepali. Safal huda matine or atine. These two words, atine, matine. Remember this. You are not allowed to atine painena, matine pani painena. Success and prosperity should not bring you that unmad. Remember that. And failure should not despair you. You should still be encouraged. Remember very famous historical incidences. Since I trained in Scotland, I know the famous story of Robert the Bruce, the Scottish king. He lost 6 battles against the English. He was hiding in the island of Hebrides. Must be the outer Hebrides somewhere, running away from the English. And he saw a spider trying to climb and failing in the cave. Tried 5 times, failed, 6 times failed, and 7th time the spider could make it. And then King Bruce suddenly decided, oh, he had 6 failures with the English, maybe I should have a 7th attempt. He came back, and believe me, he defeated the English. That's a very, very touchy Scottish history. What was the source of inspiration for Robert the Bruce? It's a spider. I think there are not spiders here, better than spiders here to inspire you. Better people to inspire you. If a spider could inspire a king, there are many national heroes for you to be inspired by. And finally, before I leave, 5 minutes more, I was talking about the ability, and I remember, I want to tell you that each and every one of us has got that ability. Whether you are so-called physically, completely, perfectly able, as you know, WHO definition doesn't make any of us perfectly healthy. All of us know that. If you stick to the WHO definition of health, no one of us is perfectly healthy. All of us have got something more desirable to achieve what is perfect health. What we are is, you might be nearer to the perfect health than me, is relative. But nobody is perfectly healthy. So you have got no right to say that I am healthy, you are not healthy. So I've got a very important speaker after me. What I'd like to say is that, so some sort of what appears a physical disability outside should not prevent you from achieving what you want. I remember a little story I studied in school. It was written by Rabindranath Tagore about a mute girl called Subhasini, father named Subhasini, with good speech, but she didn't speak. And then finally she got married off. And then he describes that she was mute, but her power of expression was perhaps more powerful than those who could speak. And Tagore describes it very nicely. I still remember one stanza, it was very famous. What he says is, when we put our thoughts into words, we cannot always express what is exactly in our mind. Something is lost in the translation from thought to speech. Try it tonight. When you appear orally, you think something, and I ask you, you cannot get it out. And do you think you are wiser than Subhasini, that mute girl? You cannot express. You are dumb in exam. So when you put our thoughts into words, we cannot always express what is exactly in our minds. Something is lost in the translation from thought to speech. Subhasini used to express through her eyes. Then he describes. But black eyes need no translating. Black eyes need no translating. The flame of the mind itself is there, shining steadily like the moon, or flashing like the restless lightning through all quarters of the sky. So your eye expression is more powerful than your speech. Similarly, if you have got a physical eye problem, I tell all of you, close your eyes. You will see more of the world than you see with your eyes open. Actually, opening your eyes restricts your vision to your visual field. Nasal, temporal, you know how much it is. But if you close your eyes, you can see beyond your visual field. So I like to say, my visually impaired young sister, it was unfortunate you lost your eyesight. But with the eyesight lost, you can see beyond your visual field. Like Subhasini could express better through her eyes, although she was mute. You can see the world better than these people who have got physically intact eyes. What's the point of having eyes who shows you something and you don't internalize? All of you know in medicine, I call some of these people so-called very bright, being they see something but they don't know what it is. I call them cortically blind. Or medical term we call it visual agnosia. Don't you think the leadership is suffering from visual agnosia? I rather have person without vision but sees the world like our young sister here. Then I have politicians who have got bright eyes but see nothing. They are politically blind. They have got visual agnosia. They don't see what's going on around them, or they don't act. So even being physically challenged, other faculty of the mind develops. I am talking as a neurosurgeon, not a philosopher. That is science. Other areas of the brain develop and you make up for that. So these people with one faculty handicap enormously develop in other areas and they can be very contributing members of the society. This is a tribute I'd like to give to our younger sister who is going to speak after that. Now, and finally, success and failure I've already told. There's a very famous saying during the Second World War that somebody was saying that English lose all the battles except the last. Let me repeat. The English have the track record of losing all the battles except the last. So if you win the last battle, you should be very happy. So there will be failures in life, but if you achieve success in the last battle, that's what matters. So there's a big battle ahead of you. And history has produced two very strong inspirational speakers during the Second World War. In one pole was Hitler, in another pole was Churchill. Mind it, if Hitler was not an inspirational speaker, he would not have millions of Germans follow him and go to their grave. He used to inspire people. So was Churchill. He used to give very inspiring speech. Remember, the difference between the two was, Hitler used to inspire people to think that Hitler is capable of doing everything. He used to make people believe that he could do anything, provided they followed him. So that is essence of dictatorship. If you follow me, I can do anything. So you follow a dictator. He hypnotizes you. And what about Churchill? He used to inspire you so that you could do anything, not him. So finally, I'd like to leave this stage by saying that I belong to the second category. I do believe if I could achieve so much, starting from Gorkha, half-starved, barefoot, and could go to the best places in the world, achieve whatever I wanted, you had a better start. And you can achieve much more than I did in your chosen field of work. So I do believe you can achieve anything. But my leadership in the country thinks that they can achieve anything if you and I support them. So they belong to the dictatorial side. So that's how the Constitution is coming. Constitution is not going to empower you and me. That's going to empower these incapable politicians thinking that they are going to deliver everything provided you support. Until the last year, Hitler was winning the war. Dictators never win. Only Democrats win. Okay? Democracy believes in mobilizing each and every one of you, as Churchill did. Dictatorship believes in making each and every one your slave, so that you follow them, so that they deliver you, based on their choice. So finally, my plea is your future, is your country, and you decide and you lead the way, we'll follow you. Thank you very much.